So, I bet you thought we were done with dual booting, but it turns out I found another cool way to use virtual disks for dual booting operating systems. Have you ever bought a new PC, but wish you had the operating system for your old PC available to you? Well, turns out you can. Stay tuned. So whenever you get a new computer, you have to deal with a new install of Windows. Typically, you have to spend a couple of weeks reinstalling programs that you may have forgotten that you even had, and then reconfiguring the system to look the way you want it to look and to operate the way that you want it to operate. But what if you could take your old hard drive and make a virtual disk out of it and then dual boot that old Windows install on your new system? Well, it turns out you can, and it works pretty well, at least under certain circumstances. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. But first, I got to pay some bills, so check out today's sponsor. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP SCD Key, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CYBERCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. So we're going to be revisiting some of the concepts that we dealt with last week, but we're going to be kind of adding a new twist to it. Instead of creating a virtual drive and installing a new copy of Windows on it, we're going to be virtualizing an old install of Windows and then modifying the BCD to allow us to boot from that old install on our new system. Now, this is going to come with some obvious exceptions. The first one, and probably the most important one, is that the old system has to be capable of booting UEFI. Unfortunately, we won't be able to boot on the new system, which is definitely UEFI, to an old system that's MBR. Now, if your old system isn't configured to boot UEFI, but the operating system itself does support UEFI, then it's possible to use the command MBR to GPT to convert an MBR system to a UEFI system. However, I did an entire video on that before, and I'm not going to recover it in this video. However, I will leave a link in the description below, so if you need to, you can follow that link in the description below and check it out. Now, you might be able to get this guide to work on an old Windows 7 install, but the likelihood of success is much higher on Windows 10 and newer. Now, this isn't because it's not possible to make Windows 7 boot UEFI. It actually is possible. But rather, in order to do this, you're going to be running an old operating system on your new hardware, which requires the operating system to detect all the new drivers for the new system. Starting at around Windows 10, this became very efficient and works really well. It didn't work very well on Windows 7, so you're going to have to kind of play around with it and see if you can get it to work. But as long as you're doing this on Windows 10 and later, then the success rate is pretty good. Another downside to this, though, is that the virtual disk itself cannot exceed the amount of free space that you have on your new drive. So if your new operating system has 1 terabyte of storage and your old system also has a 1 terabyte storage device that is completely full, then obviously this image is not going to fit on your new hard drive. So in this case, you might want to fire up your old system and remove some of the useless data that's already been backed up and transferred to your new computer. Essentially, your goal here is to free up as much space on the old operating system as possible. You can run disk cleanup, you can delete everything that's possible to delete, and go through your documents and different folders and delete all the data that you've already backed up. At least you should have already backed up that data and transferred it to your new computer. So there's no sense in having all of that data on the image because the physical drive for the new system will be accessible from the old operating system once you get it all set up. So you won't need all of that data in two places. And at this point, you want as little on the old drive as physically possible. Now, the first thing that you're going to need in order to follow this guide is a way to connect your old hard drive to your new computer. If you're doing this on a notebook, then I would highly recommend using a USB adapter just like this. This is an adapter that you can get, and you can on Amazon or any other place, and you can get these also for M2 drives as well. Now, if your old system has a spinning disk, then one of these adapters isn't going to work. Just because the spinning disk uses way more power than this thing can provide through a USB port. So in those cases, you're likely going to have to connect the hard drive to another system that can physically connect it with the SATA cable and another computer's power supply. But once you get the hard drive connected to your system and reading on your system, then you can start the process. So let's jump on the computer and I'll show you how to do it. In fact, here's my hard drive here. Let's get it done. So I have my old hard drive plugged in. Right now we're going to be doing this from Windows 11, and we're going to be setting up a Windows 10 install that I have here from a 1 terabyte hard drive. And as you can see, it's not using that much space, because essentially what I have is I have a backup drive of Windows 11 and a backup drive of Windows 10 that I use interchangeably on this system here, depending on what I want to do the video on. So if I want to do it on Windows 10, then I have a Windows 10 install that I can image over to the hard drive in this computer. But if I want to do a Windows 11 install, I can do the same thing. So I'm essentially doing that with this disk here. So the first thing that we need to do is have the drive plugged in and ready to go. And at that point, we need to go ahead and open up our browser, and we need to download a program called Disk to VHD. Now, this is a Microsoft program that converts a physical hard drive to a virtual disk image. So go ahead and just click the link here and download it. Should take a second to download, and then we can go ahead and extract our download here. And once it's extracted, we can go ahead and launch the program. It's going to ask you for administrator rights. Go ahead and hit yes and fire the program up. Now we can go ahead and close some of these windows that we have open here. Now, as you can see, this is going to detect every drive that's in the computer. Now, obviously, we want to know which drive we're imaging, and that's going to be the D drive in this case. So we can go ahead and uncheck all of these other boxes here and make sure we just have the D drive checked, because that's the one that we're going to be imaging. And then we want to go ahead and name the VHD file that we're going to be creating. So go ahead and click these little dots right here, and you want to find a location where you want to store this. For me, I'm just going to store it on the C drive. I'm going to create a new folder, called that folder vdisk, and then go into this folder, and then we want to name it. And in my case, I'm going to name mine Windows 10 and go ahead and click save. The only other thing I would make sure of is make sure that use VHDX is checked. And the reason why you want to use VHDX is because you want a dynamically expanding drive to be created, because we don't want a 1 terabyte file. We want a file that's only 39.96 gigabytes in this case. And then once we get that, we can go ahead and push the create button, and it'll take a second to create the disk. So Disk to VHD can create VHDX images just like the one we're doing right now. And by doing this, it will automatically make the image dynamic, so it takes up the amount of space on your current hard drive that the old hard drive had taken up. Now, at this point, we need to resize the image in order to make it possible to boot from it. If the image size exceeds the amount of free space on your existing disk, then it will just give you a blue screen when you try to boot up with the error, VHD boot host volume, not enough space. To fix this, we need to go into Hiren's boot CD. I've done a video on this in the past, so I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail in this video, but I'll leave a link in the description below where you can get the ISO file. So it's going to take a few more minutes to create this disk image. So once it's done, I'll meet you in Hiren's boot CD. Okay, so here we are in Hiren's boot CD, and the first thing we're going to want to do is right-click on this PC and hit Manage. Now, you should have already unplugged your old hard drive at this point, so you should just have, in Disk Management here, you should just have the primary drive for the computer itself, the computer where the image is saved to, the image you created in the last step. Now, what we're going to want to do is go up into the Action menu here, and we're going to want to attach VHD. So go ahead and click that, and we're going to browse into the C drive. So you're going to scroll down to this PC, go into C, and then into the folder that you created before, which on mine it was vdisk, and then go ahead and click the VHD and click open. And then click open again, and it should mount the VHD on your new computer. And if you scroll down here, you can see that's right here. Now, obviously, this is still a 1 terabyte drive. So we have to go ahead and shrink this drive down to a size that is going to boot on the system, because obviously we can't boot a 1 terabyte image on a computer that also has a 1 terabyte drive. That's gonna cause a problem. So we're gonna go ahead, now that we have this mounted, we can go ahead and close disk management. And we can click on start, and we're gonna open up our hard drive tools, go to partitioning tools, and we're gonna use EZEUS Partition Master. So give this a second to fire up here, and then we'll go ahead and start modifying this partition. And here we go. So now that the partition's fired up, we want to go to our second drive that we found before. And as you can see, this is the data on the drive. All this white space here is just free space. We want to make use of this free space right here. And to do that, you're just going to go ahead and right click and hit resize and move. And go ahead and grab this little dot on this side and shrink it all the way down to this side. Just like this. Now you don't want to shrink it down completely because you want to have a little bit of space. So I'm going to go ahead and give this thing 100 gigabytes. So we'll go just like that, and we're almost there. And if you want, you can actually come down here and just type 100 just like that, and it'll go ahead and resize the partition to fit that. And then go ahead and hit OK. And then once you resize that partition, go ahead and hit execute operation and hit apply. It'll take a minute to resize it, but once it's done, we can move on to the next step, which is essentially we need to clear up some space on this drive still. So once you hit finish, as you can see, we still have this partition all the way over near the side right here. And this is the Windows recovery partition. It's not really super critical, but we have to have it moved because our goal is to have all this unallocated space at the end of the disk. We want to consolidate everything to the front of the disk so we can save some of this space right here. And for some reason on images, I'm unable to move this recovery partition. I'm not sure why. You can actually do it on physical disks. If you come over here, you can hit resize and remove on the original recovery partition, but not the recovery partition that is part of a disk image. I don't know why that's the case, but it just is. So what you can do is you can right click and you can hit clone. And then from here, you want to tell it where you want it to clone to. And I'm just going to go ahead and select the unallocated space and then go ahead and hit next. And then it will clone this drive over to this space here. Now it does give it a drive letter, which is fine. It doesn't really make a difference. We're gonna eliminate that drive letter later anyway, but it doesn't matter for right now. Just go ahead and hit proceed. And then it's gonna take a second for it to clone that, and it's gonna do this one in real time. So it'll take a minute, and doesn't really have that much space on it. It's only 400 megabytes, so it doesn't take long. So now that it's done, we can hit finish. And you can see there's our drive right there. And with this one here, you can go ahead and click this one, right click, and hit delete for the original drive. And that should free up space at the end. And once you do that, you go ahead and hit execute operation, hit apply, and it'll take a second to delete that partition. And ultimately, once you're done, you want all your unallocated space, just like we have here, all consolidated to the end of the drive. So we want everything that we're using pushed up to the front of the drive right here. And then, as you can see, we have 830.81 gigabytes free. And we need to also get rid of that because, as you can see, we still have a 1 terabyte drive. We need to make this drive considerably less than 1 terabyte at this point. And for that, we need to go ahead and jump back into Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Go down to your start menu and hit the little arrow right here, and then go ahead and hit restart, and it should restart into Windows. So now that you've resized your partition and consolidated your image as much as possible, we need to resize the virtual disk as well. Unfortunately, for this next step, you'll have to have Windows Professional because we need to use some tools that come with Hyper-V, and Hyper-V doesn't come with Windows Home, unfortunately. So if you're doing this from a system that doesn't have Hyper-V available, then you might have to copy your image over to an external hard drive and then use it on a computer that has Windows Pro. Because unfortunately, if you don't resize the image, you'll still get the blue screen that we talked about previously. So let's jump back on the computer and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so the first step that you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and click the start button, go into Control Panel, And then from here, go into uninstall a program. And then you want to click this link right here that says turn Windows features on or off. Go ahead and click on that, and you want to check Hyper-V. Go ahead and install the management tools as well as the Hyper-V platform right here. And then once you check that and hit OK, it's going to have you restart your computer. So go ahead and restart it. And once you get back into Windows, we can continue on to the next spot. So for that, we're going to go ahead and open up our command prompt and make sure you run it as an administrator. The first thing we're going to want to do is go to our vdisk directory and run a directory so we have the actual name of the VHDX file that we're going to be playing with here. So go ahead and type in disk part, and from here you want to hit select vdisk file equals, and then you want the path to the file itself. So that's going to be C drive, as you can see, C drive vdisk, or on yours it might be different, but wherever you copied your vdisk files to, go ahead and go to that directory, and then backslash, and then the name of the VHDX file itself, which as you can see right here is Windows 10 VHDX. So I'm going to go ahead and type that again. And then make sure you put quotation marks around it right there and hit enter, and it'll go ahead and select that virtual disk. And then the next command you want to type is attach vdisk, and this will go ahead and mount the vdisk to the system. And then at this point we can go ahead and put list disk. And as you can see, our free space here is 830 gigabytes. Well, we don't need any of that free space. We want to eliminate that and make the total size of this hard drive what it would be without this 830 gigabyte. So for that, you can do the math in your head, or you can open your calculator up real quick and you can go 931 gigabytes, subtract 830 gigabytes, and that'll give you 101 gigabytes. So that's the size that the drive is going to be once it's finished. So from there, we need to open up PowerShell. So go ahead and click your start menu again, click on PowerShell and go run as administrator. And then from PowerShell, what you want to type is you want to type resize -VHD space, and then put a dash path, and then quotation marks, and then the path to the VHD file, which we know is C drive backslash vdisk backslash Windows 10.vhdx, and then our quotation marks again, and then hit space, and then we want to put dash size BYTES size bytes space. And at this point, we want to type in this number that we just got, our 101. So we've got 101 GB for gigabytes, and then go ahead and hit enter. And then it'll resize the VHD to 101 gigabytes. Now, if we go back to our command prompt and we hit list disk again, as you can see, we have 298 megabytes free, which is fine. If you wanted to, you could get really precise and shrink it all the way down to 0, but it doesn't have to be 0. 298 megabytes free is fine. We can go ahead and be happy with that. Now that we finally have a virtual disk image that we can actually use, there's one more thing, and that's to add the virtual disk image to our BCD so we can boot from it. So let's jump back on the computer and I'll show you how to get it working. Okay, so from here, we can go ahead and close the PowerShell. We don't need it anymore. We can also close our calculator. And then from here, go ahead and just type exit to exit out of disk part. And then the first thing that we're going to want to do, because we're messing with the BCD, and I've warned you about this in the past, is you always back up your BCD before you modify it. So to do that, just type in BCD edit space, and then you want to do /export space, and then quotation marks, and the full path of what the backup file is going to be. So for that, I'm going to put C drive backslash vdisk backslash, and then I'm going to call this one backup.bcd, and then quotation marks again, and then hit enter, and it'll back up your BCD. So at this point though, we need to list the BCD store itself. So to do that, just type in BCD edit space /enum, enter, and this will give you a listing of our different bootloaders that we currently have. Now, right now, obviously, we only have the one because we're only booting into Windows 11. So we're gonna wanna remember the identifier here. This is essentially what we need, is this identifier. So go ahead and copy that. Hit Control-C to copy it. Once you highlight it, we want to make a copy of this bootloader so we can configure it to boot into our virtual disk. And to do that, all you have to do is type bcd edit space / copy space. And then we want the full identifier. And for that, you can either right click to paste your clipboard, or you can hit Control-V, whichever one you want to do. Go ahead and hit space again. And then you want to do /D because we're going to be modifying the description here. And then you want to name what your new bootloader is going to be called. So for this, I'm just going to type old system and then put my quotation marks. Make sure you have that in quotation marks there. And then hit enter, and it will successfully copy and issue a new BCD to that bootloader. So if we go ahead and list our BCD store again, you'll see that we have our current one here, as well as the new one that we just copied. Now, this new one that we just copied is gonna boot the same operating system because it hasn't been modified yet. And so to modify it, you wanna type bcd edit space, and there's two things that we need to change. We need to change the boot device itself, and also the OS device, which this is essentially gonna be what your root device is for your C drive, essentially. So we want to change this line and this line. So to do that, you type bcd edit / set space, and then we want the full identifier, which on this one is going to be this GUID right here. We're going to go ahead and copy it, paste it down at the bottom, hit a space, and then we want to do device because device is the line that we want to change. And then space, and then what the device is going to be is you're just going to start typing VHD equals, and then from here you want these little square brackets. You want to type the C prompt or C drive letter, and then you want to hit backspace, and then the path on the C drive where your VHD image is located. And that, for me, it's going to be vdisk / Windows 10.vhdx. And at that point, we can go ahead and hit enter, and it edited that line. Now for the next one, all I'm gonna do is hit the up arrow because for the most part, everything is gonna be the same. The only difference is we're gonna slide over here to where it says device and type OS in front. So it's gonna say OS device. And then everything else should be exactly the same. We can go ahead and hit enter again, and it'll say the operation completed successfully. So now that we have the BCD modified, essentially all we have to do is reboot the computer and select the new BCD entry in the boot menu, and we should be able to boot into our old operating system. Now, once we do this, it's going to take a while to boot for the first time, and it may reboot a few times because Windows has to detect all the new drivers on your new system. Now, I've had a really high success rate booting an old hard drive on a new system. In fact, my success rate is so high that I actually offer it as an option when setting up a new system for customers. However, if for whatever reason it doesn't boot correctly, it might be due to your storage driver. And if that's the case, all you have to do is reboot the operating system into safe mode to fix the problem. Now, when I say boot into safe mode, I literally mean just boot into safe mode and reboot your computer afterwards. There's something about booting into safe mode that allows your system to boot even if the controller driver is wrong. And once it reaches safe mode, Windows detects the new controller, and all you have to do is reboot your computer and it should boot normally. So let's reboot this one and see if we can get into Windows 10. Okay, so this is the boot screen that you should come to if everything was done correctly. And all you have to do is select your old system or whatever you called it and hit enter, and it should boot into that operating system. And here we go. If we go ahead and click on our start button here, go into settings, and then from settings, we're going to go system and scroll down to about. As you can see, we are running Windows 10 Pro. This drive is from a drive that was imaged to a virtual disk and then booted from this system. So I think this is a pretty useful way to use virtual disks. Just like how last week I showed you how to install a new copy of Windows on a virtual disk, this week I showed you how to go even further with that same process. Ultimately, I think this is a great way to take advantage of virtual disks. So if you have an older program that you don't have the disk for anymore, or simply doesn't run on your newer operating system, you can dual boot into your old computer and use it from there. And since you just created a virtual disk, you could even virtualize your old computer and run it alongside your new operating system, but that's definitely going to be a topic for another video. But with that said, I mentioned earlier that this process only works if your old system uses a UEFI bootloader. So if your old system is still using an MBR bootloader, then check out this video here where I show you how to convert an MBR file system to GPT so you can take advantage of a UEFI bootloader. By using this process, you should be able to make this guide work on MBR systems. As always, you guys have a great day.